If you want to learn how to make your very own video game, this is the place for you. We are going to make a top-down 2D Zelda-style ARPG in the Godot Game Engine from start to finish. You will then have a great platform from which to adapt it into your very own game, or keep following along as we add to this with little tutorials going forward. But first, let's clear up some controversy. How do you pronounce the game engine spelled Godot?
The game engine, spelled Godot, is pronounced Godot, like Godot. It's a reference to the character in Samuel Beckett's play Waiting for Godot, where the character's name is typically pronounced the same way.
You just gave two different pronunciations in your answer.
You're right, I did. The correct pronunciation for the game engine Godot is Godot, similar to the name in the play Waiting for Godot.
G'day everyone, I'm AJ, a nerd trying to find his way in the Aussie outback. I've got a lot to learn to survive out here, so I'm studying the old legends and going bush with some local experts to make sure I am prepared for anything. To make these lessons stick, I'm going to share them with you nerds the world over as we create The Legend of Bazza, an outback survival themed ARPG in the Godot Game Engine. So join me as we explore some of the most remote, dangerous and beautiful parts of the world and level up our game dev skills in the process. Right, let's get started. So jump into Google and let's have a look for GodotEngine.org, which is the website we'll find it. Loads up straight away and we're going to download the latest version. Click on download latest, takes us to our download menu. Now I am running Mac OS with Apple Silicon, so I'm going to click on this Godot Engine 4.2.2 and that is going to download pretty quickly for us. Now if we have a look, it is only 90 meg, so that's going to be done any second now. Let's have a look in the downloads folder and there it is. So let's expand it. It gives us our app. I'm going to drag that down onto our desktop and we now have Godot ready to go. Now, whilst we have our browser up, however, let's go to AJ's Learning Lab.itch.io and that's going to take you to this screen here. We're going to click on our Legend of Bazza icon there and we're going to download these assets. Don't need to donate if you can't afford it. Hit no thanks, just take me. And we're going to download our Legend of Bazza art and our Bogan.svg. All right, that is all of the assets that we need to put together for this. It is all in those two files. Excellent. Let's get rid of our browser. Let's load up that Godot app that we've dropped onto our desktop. So it's the first time we're opening it, so I'm going to say open. Okay, so this is what you should be greeted with when you have first opened up your Godot engine. We go to this project manager. We're going to create a new project. It is going to be called The Legend of Bazza. Where are we going to put it? I am thinking I'm just going to pop this straight onto the desktop. Select there, but we are going to create the folder for it. So we click create folder. It's going to create a folder on the desktop called The Legend of Bazza. Compatibility is fine. We can just turn off our version control and hit create and edit. So this is what we're greeted with when we first load in to the Godot engine. It is essentially our main viewport here, has a 3D space and there's a few other things going on as well. Now we are making a ARPG, like a top-down 2D ARPG, Legend of Zelda style. So we're not going to be working in a 3D space. Let's click over here up the top to 2D, and that takes us to a 2D workspace. Loses one of the dimensions. That's fantastic. Now, we will be working in the script section up here a bit, but not just yet. Let's do a quick tour of Godot. So these are our different views for our main window here. As we come across to the right, we've got our play button to run our game. We've also got this clapperboard play button, which runs just the scene that we've got open at the moment. We come down to our inspector window. We've also got our node list in here when we've got some things happening. Down the bottom, we've got another window, which at the moment, can be for animations and things. There's all sorts of stuff we'll do down here too. This here is our file system. Now, our file system is pretty straightforward. At the moment, all it's showing us is we've got our icon.svg in there. We're going to dump some other assets in there as well. If we start out by right-clicking in here and go new folder, and we're going to type in the word assets. So we're creating a new folder called assets. And then what we want to do is find those files that we downloaded. So we downloaded the legend of Bazza.png. I'm going to drag that and drop it in here and put it into the folder. And we also have our bogan.svg. Let's drag that down as well. Might not have worked. Try again. Oh, hang on. It did. It's already in there. Right. So that's it. That's all of our assets that we're going to need for this tutorial, all in our file manager now. We keep coming up the screen. We get to our node list, basically, for our scene. And we're going to, may as well start now, by creating a new 2D scene. So click on 2D scene. It creates a node 2D. We're going to click on that so that we can then rename it world. So we've got a new scene called world. Let's Command S, Control S, and save that. But again, we want to make sure our filing's all nice and sorted out. So let's create a new folder called scenes, and that's where we want to save our world.tscn. Save. All right, we now have a very basic world scene. Nothing's happening in here. We've imported our assets, so we are moving in the right direction. What we want to do now is create our very first node. So because we're working in the world scene to start with, this is where we're going to basically create the world that our player will explore. And we're going to do that with a tile map node. So we come up, we've got world selected in our node list. We're going to click the plus sign and we're going to look for tile map and hit enter, tile map. All right, so we now have a tile map for our world. If you come across to our inspector window on the right hand side where we got tile set and then empty, we're going to click on empty and click new tile set, then just click on that new tile set to change our view here. And now down the bottom we can click on tile set. So we're clicking there and it gives us an empty little Explorer window there, and it says no tile set sources selected yet. So we're going to use our Legend of Bazza ARPG. So we're going to drag that into that empty space. It's going to offer to automatically create tiles. We actually don't want that because it's got lots of different size tiles in here. So let's click on no to start with. And we can now just expand that bottom window so we can see a bit better what's going on. So this is our setup at the moment. This is where we are going to go through and pick which tiles we want to use. So we want all of these, so I'm just basically highlighting them. That makes them available. I went one too far, right click and delete that one. So if you just click on them, they then become tiles that you can use in your tile set. Hopefully you're a bit better with your mouse than I am. You can sort of click and drag as well, but just get all of these juicy tiles selected because we're going to make use of them very soon to start painting our lovely canvas. So we got some water tiles here as well. And you can see looking around, there's like on this same bit of artwork, there is a bunch of other stuff. These are the only ones we want to highlight at the moment, all right? So it's just these ones. Now we're going to click over to tile map. All right, so this is our, you can see the ones that are available are the ones that we just selected. So we can't pick any of the Bazza over there. We can't get these rocks or trees because we haven't set them up in our tile set yet. All we've done is made basically our dirt and our water. So something we need to think about with our tile map is layering, right? So to be able to have some things in front of others and under others and all that sort of stuff, we need to set up our tile map with different layers. So if we come over to our inspector window and we can sort of come down here to where it says layers and expand that one, you can see there is a layer at the moment. It shows up here in our tile map as being called layer 0, but we're going to come over here to the empty name box and we're going to give it a name. We're going to call it dirt. Very creative, I know. And you see how that changed over here already? So that now means that the layer we have selected in our tile map is the dirt layer. But we don't want to leave it just at dirt. We're going to add a little bit more as well. We're also going to add in some road, and we're also going to add in some water. All right, we will do others, but this is where we want to start for now. So let's shrink this bit down again because it's a bit cumbersome and in the way. We can zoom in here just to make sure we can see everything. All right, and maybe even zoom out here a bit. So what I want to do is I've got the whole viewport shown up here now. So this is basically with the current settings, that's our entire screen. You can go as far or as short as you want with what we're going to do next, but we're going to do some really basic steps to start painting our canvas. So what I want to do with the dirt layer selected, we're going to select the dark plain square of dirt. We're going to grab our rectangle tool and we're just going to go from one corner all the way to the other. And what we're doing there is we're just completely colouring in that rectangle that we made with that particular tile. Now, if we want to start changing things, for example, we might want to change our layer to the road layer and then think about, well, how are we going to get like a road going through the middle or something like that. So what we can do there is we can use like these tiles here. So this is just a straight edge showing a little bit of the road and a bit of the dirt. We've got the road selected. I might grab our straight line tool this time, and then what I can do is just go straight across like this. Ta-da! And then the other side of the road, so we pick the top one, which is sort of the reverse. And then we go a straight line across, so like that. And now we're just going to change the color in the middle. So we pick the light one, come over here, grab our rectangle again, come over to the first square we need to change, drag it across, and there you go. We now have a road going through the middle of our scene. So we've got lots of dirt and a dirt road on top of it. Next, let's do some water. So we can do a very similar thing. Let's grab the light blue color. Let's grab the water layer and then our rectangle, and let's just go across the bottom here. Let's have some water across the bottom. Now, like with our road, we're able to give it nice defining edges. We can do that here as well with our water. So we can grab this one here, and we're going to need just the straight line and find where we want to do it and just go straight across, and now we've got a nice straight river there, nice straight road. And what we're going to do now is we're actually going to add in some extra tiles. So we're going to click on our tile set, we're going to make our view a bit bigger, and we're going to come down to the bottom where we've got these rocks and these trees. We're going to bring those into the game now. So I'm just zooming in a little bit to make sure we can see what we're doing. All right, so we have our setup selected, our setup tool selected in our tile set. These are the tiles we're going to deal with. Now, we don't want to click these one at a time because then each of these becomes only a part of the object we want. It gets a bit harder to place them. But if we hold the shift button down, click and drag, it allows us to create larger items. Now, these ones are actually single tiles. Now for this tree, same shift, click and drag. This one's the same shift, click and drag. That one's individual, individual, individual. This one's actually two, it's the one above it. Click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. And the last one, click and drag. All right, that gives us some rocks and some tiles. They're set up, but we don't have layers for them yet, if you recall. So let's go back to our tile map. Let's shrink this down because it takes up too much space. And over here, we got water, dirt, and road, remember? So we're going to add some more in. So let's add a new element. We're going to call this one trees. Add a new element. We'll call it rocks. And one more we're going to call grass. All right, so there's a bunch new layers we can play around with. So let's now do that. So click on our layer selector here in our tile map. Let's go to our trees one. Let's grab that giant tree and just find somewhere you want to put it. So I'll put it there along the roadside maybe. Another one over here. Let's grab this one. Oh, that didn't work for some reason. Just grab a few trees, scatter them about. Use your artistic license here. Let's grab that other tree. If you like that. Grab this big one again. There we go. Now maybe some rocks. I'm going to change my layer to rocks. Grab a rock. Some of these sort of termite-y looking things. I did my best to draw what they look like. They're everywhere up here where I'm living. Well, they're everywhere in Outback Australia, I suppose. Termites are one of the success stories of Outback Australia. All right, so we got some rocks. Let's grab some grass. Scroll down. Remember, that one's a little bit taller. So put a few of those around. Some of the single ones. There are different things you can use that are built in to Godot for doing this. But I figure the best thing we can do at the moment is manually control everything. So there's a few different things we can do with like the dice and stuff, which scatters them where we want them. But we're not going to get into that today. I think it would just overcomplicate things. But there's some rocks, some trees, some grass. So let's click on our world and have a look at what we got so far. Well, there it is. I think it's starting to look a little bit like Outback Australia, if I'm honest. So play a character. Let's save our work. So You're going to want Control S or Command S, depending on what you're using. And what we should do is just click this little play button up the top, all right? So we're going to click on play. We get this warning the first time we go to run our game, and it just wants us to choose what our main scene is. So the scene that it loads when we start the game, basically. And yeah, this world scene is appropriate. So let's go select current, and then it's going to load it up for us. And that is our world thus far. That's what we've painted. That is absolutely the extent of our game to date. Let's close that down. All right, and have a look at our player character. So to do that, we're going to create a new scene. So remember this world tab up here. This is a scene that has its own nodes. We're going to create a new scene for our player. So we're going to click the plus sign. We're not going to click 2D scene. We're going to go other node, and we're going to look for character body 2D. That's the node we want to use for our player character. Character body 2D. We're going to, just like with the world, we're going to click on it and rename it, this time to player. And straight away, it's got a little warning here. Let's click on our warning and see what it says. This node has no shape, right? So it can't collide or interact with other objects. And that makes sense. All we've done is created this character body 2D, but we've not done anything with it yet. We've got a little bit of work to do. So for our player, it's going to need a couple of things. One of them is the collision shape, which that warning was telling us about. So we'll add the collision shape. Back to our root node, we also, though, want an animated sprite 2D. We want to be able to see our player character moving in different directions and those movements being animated. So we also need our animated sprite 2D. Okay, I think what we'll do is we'll start with that animated sprite 2D because we can't really set up the shape for our collision shape until we can see what our player looks like. So we're going to zoom in a bit just because we're going to want to see it nice and close. So with our animated sprite 2D node selected, we're going to come over to the inspector window. We're going to click animation, and then you've got sprite frames empty. Let's click on the empty and click on new sprite frames, and then click on it again. And that changes our menu down the bottom. All right, so now we want to come up with what are our animations going to be for our player. Now our player's going, well, based on the graphics that I've given you, our player has a move up, a move down, and a move right. We don't have a move left because we can just do that in code by flipping the axis. So it's just one less animation to do, basically. So we're going to have idle for up, down, and right, and we're going to have walk for up, down, and right. So we've got one in here at the moment, one animation. It's just called default. Let's click on that, and let's go idle underscore down, and that is going to be our autoplay. All right, so I've clicked that little A, that's auto playing. So when we load our game, it's going to start that idle down animation. This little button here that's also selected means that it loops. And for our idle, we do want it to loop because as long as the dude's just standing there, he'll be bopping up and down. All right, if we come across 5 frames per second, it's probably all right. We can tinker with that if we want to, but come all the way across to our little waffle. This is where we're going to add our animation. So let's click on our waffle. We're going to our assets. We're going to go to our Legend of Bazza. Now, you can see these squares are clearly not right, okay? So we need to play around with that. So if we come to a horizontal up here that says says 4, we change it to 23. And our vertical, we change it to 24. That gives us the right number of frames. And we're just going to zoom in here and find the one that is idle down. And it's these frames here. So we click on each of those in the correct sequence, go add 5 frames. And then if we hit play, you can see he's just idling on the spot. Now, something you might see that might be a bit annoying is, well, why is the dude blurry? Now, that is actually something we can fix. So if we go up to our project menu and go to project settings and come down to textures under the rendering menu, here where it's got default texture filter linear, we're actually going to change that to nearest and close. And straight away, he's nice and crispy again. Excellent. All right, so we've got our idle down. There are a bunch of others if you remember. So we're going to add a new one, and this new one is going to be called idle up. Very creative. Another one. This one's going to be called idle right. And then there were the walking ones. So a new one called walk up. Another one called walk down. And another one called walk right. Okay, so now we've got to go through and animate each of those in the same way we did the first one. I'm going to stop talking now and do this on fast forward because it's a big waste of your time to sit there and watch me do it over and over and over again. So let's just speed this on up. All right, that is all of our animations done. So let's save our work. We're going to save that one as player.tscn in the scenes directory. Perfect. So let's go back to, save it. Let's go back to our world scene, which is this one here. Now, in order to get the player into the world scene, all we actually have to do is drop it in there. So if we open our scenes folder and find our player.tscn and just click and drag, we can literally just drop him into the scene. And there he is there, dropped in. All right, so there is our player in our world. If we save it and go and run it now, what do you think is going to happen? Well, there he is. He's idling nicely because that's the one we put on as autoplay, if you remember, but we haven't done any code at all yet. So we can't walk anywhere, we can't do anything. And also, it's pretty hard to see him. So there's a few things we're going to want to do to fix this up. So let's close that down. For our player, before we get into scripting his movement, let's work on seeing him a bit better. So with our player selected, let's click on the plus and let's look for a camera 2D node. And this camera 2D node, we can change a bunch of settings in, for example, our zoom. So I'm going to put this to maybe 3. And then there's also another one here called limit. So this allows us to make sure the camera doesn't go off the painted area. So you don't get ugly grey stuff showing up, basically. So I put my y-axis and x-axis. I started at the 0, 0 point here. So for our left, it's 0, and for our top, it's 0. Those are the actual those are the coordinates of where the edge of the map is. But we can also find the other edges, right? So if we just go across to where the actual edge is and just zoom in, you can see that we get these numbers up here. So we know that our right one is about, what, 1,100. It's a little bit more than that, but we don't want any grey. And then let's just go down the bottom and see what the bottom is. I could have zoomed out. That would have made this quicker. And about 650. So our bottom one's 650. So by doing that, if we now save our work and go in again, we now have our player. It's much closer. We can see him a lot better. And if we were able to move, the camera wouldn't go off the painted areas of the map. So that way, we make sure we don't reveal any of that stuff we haven't actually worked with. All right, now it's got to be time to start doing some actual coding, I think, guys. So for some of you, this is what you've been waiting for. For others of you, this is what you've been dreading. So let's get back to our player character. Let's click on our root node that we called player, and then let's click on this little scroll with the green plus. That's how we add a new script. Now we don't want to add this into scenes, do we? Because it's going to be a script. So we actually want to create a new scene, a new folder, sorry. So we don't want it to be in there. We want it to be in here. We're going to go create folder and we're going to call it scripts. So just in the root of where all the others are. So that's where we want it. So in scripts, player.gd. So we've got our asset for our player in the assets directory. We've got the scene for our player in the scenes directory and the script for our player in the scripts directory. So let's create that. And it automatically gives us some boilerplate code just based on the standard settings. But this code, whilst very good for making a platformer, is no good for what we're doing with a 2D top-down sort of thing. So let's actually just get rid of all of that. Rather than you watching me make a million typos, I'm going to paste the whole lot of code in, and then we're going to go through it line by line to make sure everyone's comfortable with it, all right? That's the plan. I'll even pop this out to get a bit more space so you can see exactly what we're doing. From the top, let's have a look at what we're doing. So this is how we're going with our script. This is your introduction to GD script. So we're going to extend character body 2D. Now, if you remember, the root node of our player character's scene is a character body 2D node. So by extending that, what we're saying is we want to use the properties that come with this particular node. We then create a constant called speed, and we give that a value of 100. And we set up a variable called last direction, and we make that equal to vector 2. Now what we're doing here, this vector 2 is basically storing the position of our player from point to point. So we created a new variable called last direction, just so we know which way our player is facing at any given time, essentially, and we can factor that in to our movement and our animations. So let's go down now to this next thing here, which is called a physics process function. So if we expand that, our physics process function happens every frame. All right, we could have, for example, another function here, which would be our ready function. But our ready function is sort of like in Arduino, that would be our setup function, and our physics process function would be like our loop. All right, we don't actually need this here at the moment. We might bring a ready function in a bit later on, but at the moment it's just taking up space. So we've created now a function called physics process delta. Now we're grabbing a new variable we're making called direction, and that is going to be equal to our input. So this is looking for an input from our keyboard or our mouse, where we are getting vector based on our UI left, UI right, UI up, and UI down. Now these things here automatically programmed in. If I go up to our project settings and we go to our input map and have a look at all the built-in actions, you will see we've got UI accept, UI select, cancel, all of UI left, etc., which uses the left key. All of these things are already built in to Godot. But if you want to use different keys like WASD, you can actually add them in yourself. But we're not going to waste time with that because we're trying to just do a brief overview. So let's close that down. So these are already mapped. UI left, right, up, down are already mapped to our arrow keys. So that means it's just less work for us, right? Now we're going to see our velocity is equal to our direction that we created here, this variable direction. So whichever vector we're grabbing from here times our speed. And then if our direction is not equal to our vector 2, 0, then we want to normalize our direction, update our animation to face the correct way. Otherwise, back to the idle animation. If that doesn't all make perfect sense, don't sweat it. Just make sure you copy it down exactly, because it's going to be necessary to get that exactly right. So yeah, otherwise, we're going to update our idle animation, which is a new function we've made, and we'll get to that in a moment. Next, we want to make sure that our animated sprite 2D flips along the horizontal if our last direction on the x-axis is less than 0. So that's saying if we're not going to the right, we need to flip it to the left. All right, so our animated sprite 2D, if I take this back into the normal thing, our animated sprite 2D is this guy here. If I click that and just drag it over, it creates that same item. So we've just typed that in, that's all. So let's jump back out. Animated sprite 2D, we don't need you, go away. No, it doesn't want to. All right, so we want to flip it if we're going left, and then move and slide is something that will come in handy when we get to talking about collisions, because it allows two different collision shapes to still sort of slide past each other rather than just stopping dead. Keeping on going, now we've created a function here called update animation, and it takes the argument of direction. Now direction, if you recall, up here we created it and it's listening for these guys here. So with our update animation, looking at our direction, if our direction X is not equal to 0, so it's in the positives, then we want to make sure we play our walk right animation. If our direction Y is greater than 0, we want to play our walk down. So our Y goes positive down the screen rather than negative. People out there will know why that is in game design. I am not sure, but it's different to your Cartesian planes in your maths, right? So our Y, if it's greater than 0, that means we're going down, but if it's less than 0, it means we're going up. And then the same for our idles, right? So you can see how that's all essentially exactly the same. It's just one is for our standard movements and the other is for our idle. And that is our script so far. So let's make sure we save our script. Let's pop that back in. Now let's go to our world 2D view. here's our player. If we run this now, we should be able to move our player around. So let's see if I know what I'm doing. Play, and there's our dude. He's moving to the left and the left animation is playing, and you can see our camera. Our player can still go, but our camera won't go past that point that we programmed it to, same as up the top. And he walks up, he walks down. So all those animations, all those idles appear to be working. But at the moment, there's nothing with collisions or anything like that, right? We can just walk on the water, we can walk through trees, all that sort of stuff, because we've not set any of it up yet. All right, but that is a pretty good start. Let us save our work. And let's turn our attention to those collisions. Alrighty, so let's go back to our player scene. And we've got this collision shape that we added in the node for, but we never added the actual shape. And that's why it's still got this warning next to it. So a shape must be provided. Okay, so let's click on our collision shape. Let's come across to our inspector and find where we've got our shape, and where it currently says empty, let's click on that and let's grab a capsule and then just size it to be about the size of Bazza. There we go. So now Bazza has a collision shape. We can save that. If we go and play it now though, that doesn't count for much, because whilst Bazza has a collision shape, nothing else that we've done have we set up collisions for. All right, so let's get back out of there. And what we're going to need to do is go into our tile map. So back to our world and click on our tile map node in our node list. And what we're going to do is we're going to work in our tile set again. So down the very bottom, click on tile set. But this time, instead of the setup tool, we're going to want the select tool. So let's click on select. Let's make that window bigger again. And then let's start with our water tiles. So really easy way to keep Bazza off the water is to put some collision shapes around the edges of the tiles that touch the water. And we can do that really easily, but to do it, we need to set up what's called a physics layer. So back over in our inspector window, we've still got our tile map selected. We're going to click on physics layers and click add element. All right. And that just sets up this new collision layer and collision mask with one selected for the tile map. So our tile map at the moment is on collision layer 1 and collision mask 1. But what that now allows us to do is set up things that interact with those physics layers. So with our select tool, select a tile, and I've selected this corner water one, we can then come down and find this physics menu here, open that up, and we've got physics layer 0, which is the one we just made, open that up, and down the bottom here you've got an image of that tile at 800% and a bunch of tools. We're going to grab that green plus tool, and that's going to allow us to put some nodes down to create the area that we want the collision shape to be on. So all the water is what I'm basically blanking out there. And then I'm going to click over to our next tile, do the same thing. So you can guess what's happening here. I will fast forward now. So we'll just go around and do all those.
They set that bar so low I could step right over it. And the way that you hold me close says you never want me to leave. Girl, I hate to say it, but I'll only make you grieve. You say when I smile at you, my eyes, the soul is on me.
I should explain that I'm not doing the entirety of these rocks because we want our player to be able to actually walk behind it. And if we do the whole thing, he won't, because the player will just bump into the rock. So by just doing sort of the lower half, it still allows Bazza to look like he walks behind it. There's a little bit more setup to do for that, but we'll show you that in a minute. I'm going to keep going with our rocks, termite things, and our trees, and just watch the patterns I use, because you'll see it's all to facilitate that ability to walk behind.
Every girl is shacked though, I only end up humming. I keep on running back to the arms of my favorite barman. Sorry about this girl, but I ain't your Prince Charming. All
right, so that's all of those done. So let's just drag that back down. Now, there's a few other minor things we have to do. Actually, no, you know what? Let's just jump in, test that so you can see what I mean, and then we'll sort out the Y sorting. So let's save our work. Let's run the game. So now we should be able to walk into this rock. All right, so there we go. We can't walk through it, but we can walk behind it. Now, with the tree, you see what's happened there? I've actually walked on top of the tree. So we've got a few things to do to try and fix these up yet, but in that direction, you see how I went over the top of there. Grass, all that, so we can't walk through it. So we've got our collisions, but we've got to tweak our Y. That's sorting objects on the Y-axis. Now, it is a 2D game, but the Y-axis is just going to allow us to give the illusion of 3 dimensions, all right? So if we go to those layers we made, all right, and have a look at a couple of things, Y sorting and Z index. So for our dirt, for our road, for our water, I want all of those to not have Y sorting turn on, and for our Z index to be 0. But when it comes to our trees and our rocks and things, I want to change that. So we're going to turn on Y sorting. We're going to increase the Z index for trees and for rocks. And then let's also go to our grass and let's turn it on there as well. But we now get a warning in our tile map. Okay, so if we come back over here and click on this warning, it's telling us that a tile map layer is set as Y sorted, which we just did to 3 of our layers, but Y sort is not enabled on the tile map node itself. So now we need to find where we can sort out our Y sorting for the tile map node. So if we have a look at our, I think, ordering, there it is there, Y sorting enabled. So let's turn Y sorting enabled on. That makes that little warning go away. Let's save our work and see if we've got that looking a bit better now. So here's our player. He can now walk behind the tree, but he can't walk through the tree. He can walk behind the rock, but he can't walk through the rock. Let's try some other things. So the grass, yeah, we can go behind that bit of grass. We can go behind the termite mound, the tree. Excellent. So that is our Y sorting and that is our collisions sorted. So we've now got a player who has got a full range of movement and animations, and we've got a world he can explore, running into things, interacting with things, and also going behind things. So we're going pretty well so far, I reckon. Let's close that down and look to our next step. Is a outback Aussie survival game and not a hack and slash RPG style. We're going to start out by dealing with our fluids and what happens if you go without them in the outback, as opposed to just diving straight into swords and whatnot. So we're going to create a new scene. So we're going to create a item that we can pick up that gives us back health, and that's going to be a whole new scene. So let's click on the plus up here, and we're going to go other node, and we want to give it an area 2D as its root node, and then let's rename that to VB. Some of you have got an inkling as to what we're going to make here. Now let's add a new node as a child of that and make that a sprite 2D, and let's also add another, which is a collision shape 2D. Now, we will come back and make the shape for our collision shape once we've set up our sprite. So let's just save what we've done so far. We're going to save this as vb.tscn in the scene directory. Perfect. Now, our sprite 2D. Let's make sure we've got our inspector view. We're going to grab our legend of Baza art and we're going to drag it to where it says texture empty. So drag it across, and drop it into texture empty. Now, obviously, it's showing everything. That's no good for us. But there's an animation menu here. We'll drop that down. Remember how we set these up earlier? It was 23 this way, 24 that way. And then the frame that our VB is on is actually 231. All right, so if I zoom in, you'll see what I'm talking about. There it is there. Vaguely looks like a can of VB if it was shrunk down to 16 by 16. Okay, so that has our item there. Next, let's sort out that collision shape. So click on the collision shape where it's got shape empty. Let's grab a capsule, I guess. Let's thin it down and shrink it a bit. There we go. That is our collision shape for our VB. So let's save what we've done so far. Let's go back to our world scene and let's drop it in. So just like with the player, all we have to do is grab it, drag it, and drop it. And you can do that multiple times as well. So we could put 2 VBs in. So if we run it now, we've got a VB over here that nothing happens with when we touch it, and a VB over here that nothing happens with when we touch it. Nothing happens because we haven't given it a script or anything yet. So let's close that back down, and let's go back to our VB and have a think about what's going to come. Let's go to our root node, the VB Area 2D root node, and let's click on adding that script like so. We don't want it to be scenes, we want it to be scripts. All right, save that. Gives us this nice boring bit of boilerplate. Let's get rid of that. We don't want it. I'll copy in my own. So we are still going to extend Area 2D. We're going to create a constant, which is how much health this gives us back. We'll set that at 50, but obviously you can change that easily. And then we've got this function here, on body entered body, if body is in group player, I'll explain all this, body.health plus equals health amount, then print Bazza chugs the VB, health increased by health amount, and then Q free. So let's talk that through. Constant health amount 50, that's how much health we want the VB to give us. On body entered. So we've got this area 2D, right? And what we're checking for here is when a body enters that area 2D. And that body, we want to know if that body is in the group player. All right, so if a player enters the area 2D of that VB, if the body of a player enters the area 2D of this VB, then we want to check the body's health amount and add whatever the health amount of the VB is to that. So plus equals, so whatever it is already, add 50 to it. Then just print this here so we know what's going on, including the 50. And then Q free means basically, then let's delete this VB from the scene. All right, so let's save that. Let's go and run it again. Now, even after we've done that, nothing happens. Even though we got that script, nothing's happening. So the reason this is because we haven't actually put the player in the group player, and also we haven't connected this signal through. So by connecting the signal, what I mean is we can do some things outside of the code sometimes, which makes life a bit easier. So with our VB Area 2D node selected, if we, next to inspector, we've got the nodes, click on that. Hang on, what have I done? There we go. Click on that with the VB Area 2D selected. And then we want to find body entered. If I double click body entered and connect it through, we'll then connect this signal, this bit of code will now be connected. All right, so now when a body enters the Area 2D of the VB, it runs this bit of script. But we still haven't put our player in the group player. So this is something we can do manually. Save what we've done there. Let's click on our player, and then let's go to our, let's create a new function. So we're going to add in a ready function, just because we don't need to do what we're going to do every frame, which is add to group, and the group we want to add it to is called player. Oops, like that. So we've got a ready function now where we add the player to the group player. The reason we're doing that in a ready function, not in the physics process function, is because we just don't need it to happen every single frame. We only need to do that at the start. So now, if I'm right, and we save this and we go in, we should be able to touch the VB now. So let's have a look. Oh, we crashed it. Excellent. All right, so why did we crash it? Well, there is no variable called health in our player. So let's go back to our player and let's sort that out. So up the top here, let's add in a variable. So variable health, and we'll make it equal 100, all right? So at the start of our player script, we've added a new variable called health, and we've given it a value of 100. So let's save that and let's try again. So let's cancel what we were doing and let's play again. Now when we touch it, is it going to crash or are we going to get something? All right, if I just move that up, you'll see our printout down here. Bazza chugs the VB, health increased by 50. So that is working excellent, but how do we know that without just reading our printout? So let's close him down again. And let's do something a little bit more fun. So let's go back to our player, and now let's click on our player root node, and we're going to add a new node to it, but this time we're going to add a progress bar. All right, so a progress bar. Let's first start off by looking at it in the 2D view. So I'm going back to my inspector as well. First thing I want to do is turn off percentage, get rid of that. And let's just drag it to get things lined up. So obviously the standard size here is much, much bigger than what you would expect for a tiny little 16 by 16 baza. So I'm just trying to get that lined up a bit better. That's even still probably a bit big. There we go. Something like that, I think. Oh, I clicked off it. That helps. Okay. Now we want to change our fill mode. Instead of beginning to end, we want to go end to beginning because this is going to be a health bar, so it actually decreases. And I've turned off the percentage because the numbers are just too big and it's annoying. Next thing I want to do though is just to make sure it stands out and it's nice and pretty, let's go down to visibility, and then where we've got modulate, normally this sort of thing's got a bit of a greeny tinge, hasn't it? So we'll give it a green tinge like that. All right, save. Now we're going to have to go into our script for our player and we're going to have to tweak this because we want this to all show up, don't we? We want to be able to see the health bar moving in accordance with the actual health of the player. Yeah, I know what I'm saying, right? All right, so what we're going to do to sort that out is we're going to add a new function in our player script. So I'm just going to come down, add it down the bottom here. So this one's going to be called update health, and we're going to grab we're going to create a variable called health bar, which will be equal to our health bar here. But I need to rename our progress bar to make that happen. So health bar. So I've renamed my progress bar to health bar. Now this note here is correct. So our update health, we're going to go var health bar equals health bar value equals health. So we're saying that. Why am I doing that? I'm making that way more complex than I need to. Let's simplify that. Hey, let's make it make more sense for you guys. So let's get rid of that. All right. So this makes more sense. And we can even do that manually too. We could grab our health bar and drag it down like that. Yeah. And then it's just the value of that health bar should equal health. And health is up here. So whatever this variable is of 100, we want the health bar to reflect that. And our max value of our health bar is 100 and our min is 0. And because we've got it going end to beginning, it means that now when we start the game, we're going to have a fully green health bar. And when we lose health, then it's going to lose some of the green out of the bar. I hope that makes sense. So let's save that and let's go and have a look at that. All right, that is an empty health bar. What did I do wrong? Yeah, we get health and it doesn't fill. So I've made a mistake. Let's see what we've done. I think, well, we made a function called update health, but we're not calling that function. So let's add that into our physics process. So just the first line here can be our update health function like that. Now, fingers crossed, that should now display the health, updating it frame by frame to make sure it's correct. So as we run that, yes, excellent. All right, so we've got lots of health. We can get more health by drinking, but we've got a little bit more work to do, don't we? Because it's kind of boring as it stands. So I think probably the next thing to do is to add in a traditional Australian enemy to the bogan, the magpie. So we're going to create a whole new scene again that is going to be all about our magpie. Let's head on up to the top there and click the plus to create a brand new scene. And we're going to do this the same way we did for our player. So let's go other node, and instead of an area 2D or a sprite 2D or whatever, we want a character body 2D. And we're going to click on it to rename it straight away to Magpie. So remember, we get this warning without a collision shape of some kind. So let's just do that straight away. Let's add a new node and make that a collision shape. We can't add the shape yet because we don't have anything going on there. We want to click back on our root node, click add, and we want to have an animated sprite 2D, just like we did for our player. And that's the one that's going to take a little bit of our time now. So we got our animated sprite 2D, come across to our animation, sprite frames is empty, right? So we want new sprite frames in there. And we're going to, again, we're going to add the animations in here and do it all, you know, the way we did before. So this is going to take a little bit of time. We might speed it up as well, but let's rename our default one to be right. So we're not going to have too much here. We're going to have right, we're going to have up, and we're going to have down. Oops, got to rename it. Down. They don't need to loop. And you know, right can autoplay. It doesn't really matter because we're going to pick that when we're doing it. But let's start with down. Let's go to our waffle. Let's grab our Legend of Bazza. If you can remember, we've got a 24 by 20, no, 23 by 24. Oh, I'm already forgetting. 23 by 24. There we go. And then we just got to find our magpie. Which one did I say we're doing here? Down. So our magpie flying down and have the eyes down the bottom. Do, do, do. Add frames. Now our...
And before I knew your toothbrush was on the sink right next to mine. Sure, right now I don't mind.
All right, so those are our animations all done. Let's save our magpie scene to our scenes directory. Next thing we want to do is our collision shapes. Let's click on our collision shape. Empty. Let's go with probably a circle is going to work best for a bird with flap and wings. That's actually not bad. Just make it a bit smaller, I think. Yeah, that'll do. All right, that can be the collision shape for our magpie. Save. Now we want to click on our root node and add a script. And we don't want to save it in scenes. We want to save it in scripts. Like so. Gives us the default. Let's get rid of that. And let's add in the code that I have for us. All right, so let's go through this one from top to bottom. We actually, let me pop that out. Might be easier. Okay, so we are extending character body 2D as you would expect, because that is our root node. So we always extend the properties from our root node. We've got a variable speed at 50, a variable health at 50, a variable direction vector 2, which is the same as what we did in our player. And we've also got a new variable called direction timer, change direction timer, because we've got a little bit of stuff going on behind the scenes to make the magpie move about, because it's not going to be controlled by the keys, right? So we also want to do a bit of extra code in here to handle that. So change direction timer at 5, so every 5 seconds it's going to change direction. So we now have a ready function, and in that we're adding our enemy to the group enemy. Just like our player is in the group player, our enemy is in the group enemy. We then want to run a function called choose new direction, which we make down a little bit lower. We want to have our set process set to true, and we want to randomize. So if we keep going down now our process function, our function every frame, we're going to get that change direction timer counting down. If it gets to 0 or below, we want to choose a new direction, which is a function that we just talked about, and then reset our change direction timer back to 5 seconds. Now in our physics process function, we're going to calculate our velocity being direction times speed, just like we did for our player, and we're going to do move and slide, just like we did for our player. If we keep coming down, we have our choose new direction function, which we mentioned, where we create a new variable called directions, and we've got a bunch of vector 2s, right? And these are all based on the direction that the magpie is facing. 1 and 0, -1, you know, you can work that out. And then our direction, we want it to equal those directions we just created, randomized by the direction size. So we're just creating a little function here to try and get the magpie to pick a new direction every 5 seconds and fly in that direction. And we then update the animation to suit whatever that new direction is. And what is our update animation function? Well, that's this following one. So function update animation, and we're going to say if our direction is equal to that vector 2 being 1 and 0, then our animated sprite 2D, which is in there, we want our flip H to be false. So what we're saying here is our horizontal, we don't want to flip it, we want it to just be going the standard right animation. But then for the next one, you see that it's if our vector 2 is -1 and 0. So we're saying if it's facing the other direction, to the left, then we want flip H to be true. We want to flip our animation over so that even though it's the right animation, it's playing looking like it's going left. And then we've got our up and our down where we don't use that flip H at all because we've got two different animations. And that is our magpie. So let's save that. Let's pop it back in. Now let's go to our world. Our world 2D view, and let's throw a magpie in here, just like we've thrown a few VBs in. So let's grab our magpie and let's drop it in just like that. And let's see what happens if we hit play. All right, so our magpie flies around. What happens if we get in the way of it? well, we get in each other's way, basically, right? That's all that really happens. But you can see that when the animation is stalled, might need to play around with those animations because they're not flying quite as neatly as I thought they would. But it's not a big deal. Let's have a quick look. Magpie, animated sprite 2D. Maybe if we increase the frames per second, maybe. Like that. Hang on, that one's... Oh, no, let's actually put these... Oh, no, not auto. I'm talking to myself. Don't worry about me. We don't need any of them on auto. And what we might do, though, is set them all to loop, just in case that makes it a bit smoother. Let's run that again. Yeah, so now it looks like he's flying a bit more rapidly, trying to get away from me. You going to pick a new direction and come back? Oh, he's left me. He might come straight back, but he could be going up or down. All right, never mind. We've worked it out. The Magpie looks a bit more natural. Okay, but nothing happens when we run into the Magpie, so that's a bit lame. So that's the next thing we probably need to think about, I think, is what's going to happen when our dude crashes into a Magpie. In Australia, it's actually illegal to fight back against the terror that is the Magpie. We do tend to just want to turn and run away regardless. So that's actually what we're going to be doing here. We're not going to be fighting this Magpie off. We're going to need to get away from it because it is going to do us harm. So the way we're going to handle that, let's grab our player again, and let's create a way for the Magpie to interact with our player, not just our collision shape, but in a similar way to how we, as the player, can interact with the VB using the Area 2D. We're going to think about this Area 2D we're about to make as like a hitbox. So if we click on our player's root node, click on plus to add a new node, and we want to grab an Area 2D, let's rename it to be hitbox, and then let's give it a collision shape, which is how we just give shape to this specific Area 2D. So let's grab a capsule again, but we're going to make it a bit bigger than our collision shape for just running into trees and things, because otherwise the Magpie won't be able to get to it. So we want our hitbox to be slightly larger than our other collision shape. So there's our hitbox. We've got it there. We're going to need to signal this hitbox through to our script though. So let's get our script view up for our player as well. Let's drop down the bottom here, and you'll see that when we click on our hitbox, come across to our node 2D and go to body entered, and do that, we get a brand new function automatically added in for us, right? And it's already connected. So, and this is going to be on hitbox body entered. And this is where we're going to work out how do we make sure that our player loses health when it comes into contact with the Magpie. So instead of pass, which just allows us to not break the whole thing, what we're going to do, I'm going to type this one in because I just am. If body dot is, oops, this is what I don't normally, in group, if you recall, we put our bird in the enemy group. So if our body in question isn't in that group, is in that group, gee whiz, I'm getting everything backwards. So if the body that comes into our hitbox is in the group enemy, what are we going to do? We want to deduct health, and we want that to be, say, 10. So Magpie hits us, we lose 10 health. That's fine for now, I think. So deduct health 10. But, minor problem, what the hell is deduct health? That's a function we haven't made yet. So let's just go back up here. Let's create a new function called deduct health. And we're going to give it an argument to pass through called amount, because that's what we were doing just down below where we had the 10 in the brackets. So here where we go deduct health 10, that 10 is this amount argument that we're passing through. If we remove amount from here, then that won't work anymore. And if we remove that from there but still have it there, this won't work. We must make sure that when we call this function, we also have an argument for amount. So what are we going to do in this deduct health scenario? So we're going to go health minus equals amount, which was, if you recall, just above us there in the argument that we're passing through. And then that's not enough. We also need to go, well, if health is less than or equal to, is less than 0, what are we going to do? Well, let's just make sure that our health equals 0. This will just make life a little bit easier for us. We don't have to worry about it always being negative. So if health is less than 0, just make it 0. And then we want to call the update health. Update health function to make sure that that 10 that we're taking off updates our health bar as well. All right, so if we have a look at what we've done, we've got a health bar there we talked about. We've created a new function called deduct health, which takes an argument of an amount. So what we want to happen when this deduct health function is called, we want our health to take away whatever that amount is. So if we're currently 100, we want to take away 10, so it's going to be 90. But if our health gets down to 0, just round it back to 0, update the health. We don't want to go into negatives, and then we're going to need to do something else in a moment, aren't we, to handle death and things. But let's just make sure we can get some of this other gear working first. So let's save what we got there. I reckon that should work. So let's come on over to our 2D view of the world again. Let's hit the play button and let's go and see what happens. See that? So we ran into the Magpie and we lost health. So now let's see if we go back to our VB and pick it up, do we get health? We did, so it filled it up. So now our collectible is working to replenish our health, and the magpies, when we get in their way, they take 10 health off us, which is perfect. That is basically my level of survival skills, right? I can drink something if it's packaged and looks like a bottle, and I can run away from wildlife. So I've just arrived here in the outpack in real life. I think where Bazza sits now is pretty much on par with my own skills. I think all we need to do now is add in a way for Bazza to cark it, and then maybe a way to reload the game when that happens. So let's have a look at that as our next step. How do we kill Bazza? Well, let's close that window down. Let's go back to our player scene and to our animated sprite 2D, and let's add a new animation, and we're going to call it die. So rename it to die, D-I-E, and we don't want this to loop, because when we die, we die. It's not the wheel of time, turning of the wheel. Let's click on our waffle, let's get our, oops. Okay, let's remember what we got here is 23 and 24. There we go. Let's zoom on in and find our death ones, and it's clearly these ones. Let's add those frames. So we now have a death animation in there. We need to now update our script to handle this animation, right? So let's go back to our player script. Where should we play around with this one? Well, we want to add maybe a variable up the top here, just about death. You know, we all probably have this built in to our own way of thinking. Variable is dead equals false. Yes, I woke up today. The is dead variable is again false. Let's go to our physics process, and we're going to put in a little thing at the start here. So we're going to go if is dead, return. So what we're trying to say there is if we're dead, we don't really need to do any of these other things. You know, if you're dead, take the day off. That's kind of the message here. So if we're dead, return, but we've got to do a little bit else. So we're going to need to have some sort of way of handling our health that takes into account death. So if we come down to our deduct health function, what we want to do is we're going to say, well, that's fine. If our health is negative, that's fine. Health is 0, that's fine as well. We're then going to update our health, but what we want to do next, come back to the if level there and go, well, if health equals 0 and not is dead, right? Does that make sense? So if our health is 0, but we are not dead, we need to handle that death. Handle your death, man. Just get it over with. Handle death. We haven't made a handle death function yet, though, okay? So we've updated our deduct health to just allow for the death. So if our health is 0, but we're not yet dead for some reason, let's run this handle death function. So what is the handle death function? Well, let's make it. Oops. Let's make it func handle death. What are we going to do here? So in our handle death function, we're going to go is dead equals true. Makes sense. That's probably a pretty obvious part of it. And then what we want to do is just something with our animations. Let's grab our animated sprite. Oop, there it is there. Our animated sprite 2D. What are we going to play around with here? Well, we want to play which animation do we want to play? That first one, die. So play the die animation. Yep. Now we want to connect through a signal from our animated sprite 2D. So here's our animated sprite 2D selected. Let's go to our node list. And what we want to do is the animated finished one. So let's connect this one through. That's then going to give us this new on animated sprite 2D finished down the bottom here. And what we want to do there is we just want to add in a couple of lines of code. I've had enough of typing because I'm just making too many errors. So let's just paste it on in. Ooh, that's in the wrong spot. var. All right, so now what we're saying here is function on animated sprite 2D animation finished. So that's the signal we just connected through. You can see it's connected with that there. We've created a new variable called anim name, and that is just equal to whatever animation currently happens to be happening. If it happens to be die, we want to get the tree and reload the current scene. So we're basically saying whatever our the highest node is on the scene tree, so in our world, whatever is up here, we want to reload that scene. So we're saying if our player dies and when the death animation has stopped, so that's what this one here is, reload the scene. So let's find out if this works, but before we do, let's just change our health down to like 20, just to make it a lot easier for everyone. So health is 20. Let's jump on in and see how we go. So there's our Magpie. Let's get in his way. He dies, and then the scene restarts. One of the problems we have now, of course, is that this game will be endless. We can just, every time we die, we'll be brought back to life. So there's an easy way we can fix that as well. So we're going to add a whole nother scene again, and this is going to be our UI layer, and we're going to build this out over time, not in this tutorial. We're going to run out of time. I can't do this forever. But let's go up and create a new scene, and this time it's going to be a user interface scene, and where we've got a control node, let's change that to be called UI. And what we want to do here is create a new node, and it's going to be a button, just like that, and the text for that button is going to be the word quit. So that's all I want to do there for now. Let's save our new scene as a UI.tscn. Excellent. Now let's jump back into our world, and what we're going to do, we're going to drop this UI as a child of the camera, and the reason is that way it's always in screen. So let's grab our quit, let's take it up to our corner here like that, and let's just give that a test and make sure that it is always going to be in that part of the screen. So let's go and play. All right, it's there now, and as we walk, you can see that the quit button stays right there, which is what we want. Excellent. So let's quit back out of that. I can't click the quit button because we haven't done anything to it. So let's go back to our UI scene, and let's create a script for it. No, we don't want it to be called scenes. Oops. We want it to be scripts, and it is going to extend our control node because that's our root node. What I want to do here, though, is don't know if I need any of that. I want to signal this button through. So let's get our node list, and when the button is pressed, we want to signal it through like that. Instead of passing, what we want to do is we want to basically quit the game. That's the goal, isn't it? So when we have pressed our button, let me just grab the code I need because I'm over typos. There it is there. Oh, hang on. I think I've got, there we go. All right, so when the button is pressed, get tree.quit. So let's save that and see if that all works. Play and quit, and it works. Excellent. So Baz's only skill at the moment is drinking fluids and running away. I reckon that's pretty dead on for the reality of me stumping up here in the bush without a wit or a skill to me name. So please like, subscribe, and share this with your mates as I continue to head out bush with new friends, as well as try and master skills from the Bush Tucker Man, Malcolm Douglas, and of course, Russell Coit. Then we'll then be coming back to the lab and trying to implement all of that into real game mechanics for this new game, The Legend of Bazza. Thanks, guys, and I hope you learned something.